Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's council meeting. I'm going to call it to order at this point in time and invite Councillor Forder to read our land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
Thank you. And now I'll just invite you to join me in a moment of silent reflection on today's business. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'll just remind you, you can bring it forward at any time that it occurs to you. And we'll move on to announcements. I see quite a pronounced announcement being worn by Councillor Bartley. I just want to assure you that all our sentiments are behind your shirt.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner, and I'm sorry I did jump ship, but there is a hockey game on tonight we should all watch. This is a bit of an announcement. Yesterday in Bogner, we had a strawberry tea, and it was to help celebrate the 150th. It went over unbelievable. They sold out 3 seatings. Most of council was there. Mr. Urick was our best server possible. But what warms my heart more than that is that Bogner from the Sydenham Township is committed to the Meaford celebration. And then I attended a meeting with the Sydenham Optimists and had dinner with them in a couple hours, and they're committed, a Sydenham group committed to the Meaford splash pad. It warms my heart that the municipality has come together. Thank you.
And it truly has. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'll add my kudos to the strawberry tea yesterday. It certainly was fantastic, and I think I want to acknowledge that our CAO, Kim, was also present and enjoyed the treats. It was a terrific day. And I really appreciate your sentiments, Councillor Bartley, because we're certainly hoping that the momentum from our 150th will move into the celebration next year, which of course is our 25th anniversary of amalgamation. And so we really are hoping to bring the municipality together for a huge celebration at that time. And with Your Worship's indulgence, I do have 3 or 4 announcements, if I may. Thank you. And I certainly want to extend huge congratulations and appreciation to the organizers of last Saturday's event. The parade and the family festivities on the 15th of June were outstanding. Kim Ware deserves a huge amount of credit for leading that day, along with J.D. Moffat and Angie Hastings for organizing the parade, Janice Height and Holly Clark for all of the afternoon festivities, the downtown decorated by Grace and Jess, and Liz Harris and her team for the flowers, and all the decorations at Meaford Hall and so on. So it was a really wonderful coming together of volunteers to make that day so special. Last Wednesday evening, I had the privilege of attending the retirement party for Mike Renchek, the CEO of Bruce Power, which was a really lovely event. And I was happy to extend our congratulations on his retirement from the municipality of Meaford. Minister Todd Smith was in attendance, and recognizing that he has a new role now as Minister of Education, I spoke to him about our school, recognizing, of course, that we have our brand new school now with a number of portables. And Mr. Smith shared with me that he also recognizes that enrollment capacities really were not equated to growth projections at the time of the planning for this school. So he certainly is making it a priority in his tenure to make sure that those projections are considered moving forward. And I did remind him, of course, that the school board still owns a piece of property in Meaford, so we'll just let that sit with him for now. I did also speak with Rick Byers at that event with my county hat on, and asked him if there were any updates on the Durham Hospital. And he indicated that there was a discussion underway about potentially hosting a meeting with Southwest Health, Grey County, and Bright Shores. So it just gave me a tiny glimmer of hope that maybe things are not completely over and done with for the good folks in Durham. I wanted to congratulate Jody Ormsby and her team as well, because they hosted a really successful ball tournament this weekend in honor of Ashley Clark, the second annual Ashley Clark Memorial, in recognition of the loss of this lovely young woman. And the funds are all going to support her two daughters for recreational sports going forward. And even though it rained, they continued with a really, really excellent event. And my last announcement, I think everyone has a copy of the Sydenham campus brochure in front of them. Mayor Kentner and I are well aware of this fantastic facility in Owen Sound, the old Sydenham School. And I encourage you to take a moment and read through the brochure, because the success of this undertaking is just incredible. It's full now. They've been funded to the tune of over $1 million. They have a makerspace. They're working with the Henry Bernick Center, and the number of people that have gone through the center for training. The Georgian College is taking space there now as well, and they're training PSWs and a number of different trades. There's also the Business Enterprise Center in the building and so on. So I do encourage anyone to take a minute and read through the brochure, and they would love to give you a tour. If you're ever in Owen Sound and you have a minute, drop in, and I know that they would be delighted to give you a tour. Thank you very much.
Other announcements? Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll piggyback on the deputy mayor on a couple of things. So yes, regarding Sydenham campus, they actually had an open house. I was lucky enough to be able to attend and did get the tour, and it is phenomenal. It is so impressive. We all know how important trades and various social requirements we have, and it is impressive how much that facility offers for just almost everything you can imagine. So yes. Secondly, it would be remiss, piggybacking on sesquicentennial success, it would be remiss if we didn't talk about Canada Day. The Canada Day weekend's coming up, and once again, our volunteers have come full for under the guidance of our own Jen Brebner. So there's going to be a plethora of things to take advantage of this weekend. Kicks off with a special concert taking place on Saturday, June 29th at 7:30, and it's going to feature a variety of local talent in celebration of Meaford's 150th. Tickets are only $20 for adults and $5 for students, so we encourage everybody to get out and support that. Sunday, June 30th, you can head to the Ann and Ball Diamond for 6 o'clock for a barbecue and enjoy some great live music and free activities. Then on Monday, the Meaford Harbor will be once again buzzing, like it was a week and a half ago, with activities from 8 until 4. So between barbecues, beer garden, all kinds of festivities, canoe tours, Wheatley Parade, the Golden Town Cruisers, games, lots to do for family and all. And of course, once that's over, you can then head to Wagner and you can check out another barbecue, listen to some more great music, but they have a phenomenal classic car motorcycle club display, as well as their amazing fireworks. So that's admission is $10 per family at the gate. So there is lots to do in Meaford this weekend, and really encourage everybody to get out and enjoy and support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I'm just going to sort of return to Bogner for a minute. I really didn't think I was capable of devouring 5 desserts in a row, but I conquered it. And it was awesome. Just a terrific event. And from there, Ruth and I went over to Owen Sound to be on hand for the ribbon cutting of the Bruce Grey County Music Hall of Fame, which Bogner Bill Murdoch had so much input to. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by fire when the Shallow Lake Legion branch burned, but through a great deal of effort and work, they have reopened in a room adjacent to the Military Museum in Branch 6 of the Royal Canadian Legion, and it is just simply beautiful. to the point that they are now finding a great demand to rent that room for social occasions because people are, it's just such a bright, beautiful spot. And you have all this memorabilia that they are starting to recreate because, of course, most of it was a total loss. But anyway, that was great. And they even gave me an opportunity as mayor of Meaford to say a few words, and it was a pleasure to participate in that. And then I also want to mention a fairly new event, but coming back for year 2, the Meaford Pet Expo returns July 20th from 10 to 3 at Canadian Pet Connection in Meaford. Does anybody here know where that is? You can enjoy over 60 pet-related vendors, food trucks, freebies and giveaways, a kids zone with face painting and a bouncy castle, and a whole lot more. So bring your pet to this event, rain or shine. So, and now I'm going to move on if there's nothing else in the way of announcements. Oh, sorry, if you have an announcement, oh, you have an announcement, Councillor Greenfield. I didn't see your hand before.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Warden's Forum that took place down in beautiful downtown Holstein last Thursday evening. Mayor Kentner and the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Forder and myself were lucky enough to be able to attend. Called by Warden Millen, of course. Always a very interesting evening. A great many of our great county council members and staff members, and in particular county staff members. The county group went through quite a detailed description of what's going on at the county. Many projects, a lot of big dollar numbers involved, but all very advantageous to our county and our community. The main speaker was a gentleman named Rob Black, Senator Rob Black, I should say, from the federal government. Yeah, a few very interesting comments. One thing he did talk about was when he first applied to be a senator, and I didn't really know you applied to be a senator, but apparently you may. This was, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago. He filled out an application, and there were three requirements. You had to be a Canadian citizen, you had to be at least 30 years old, and you had to have $4,000 in a bank account and have that confirmed. I think he said it. He didn't really hear much for 2 years, and then all of a sudden things started to happen for him. So he's very concerned with agriculture. I believe his background is in soils science and research and experimentation, and he's doing his best to get the word across to his fellow senators that hey, look, food's pretty important item in our country and in our world, and he's trying to do his utmost to get more interest in just how our country and the world is going to feed our population in the next few decades. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other announcements? Did you have one, Kim?
Yes, actually, I have 3.
You go right ahead.
One, I just want to introduce everybody to Holly Maroney. I know she came around, but she's one of the newest members to the municipality, and she'll be working on the communications and working in our team, also working with all of us on various different social media communications, and probably most importantly on the strategic initiatives and the performance measures that we'll be going forward with. The other announcement I had was just a little bit of a shout out to the Main Street Meaford. They are an initiative started here with the municipality, and they've started having their nonprofit meetings. And I attended that last week, actually with Holly as well. So I just wanted to let everybody know that they're well on their way into meetings, and it is a citizen-led group. And so if there are other people that are interested, they can either contact the municipality and or reach out through the Gmail account that's on their website. The last update is again kind of a very nice collaboration, between the municipality and the citizens, which is the advisory group. The particular one coming up this week is going to be the growing our economy. So just wanted to remind people that that is on Wednesday, the 26th at 1 p.m.
Thank you very much. So moving on now to public participation, members of the public are encouraged to provide council with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released and will be limited to 10 minutes. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on items on the council agenda or to ask a public question of council, they may do so either in person or remotely via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation or ask a public question must register in advance with legislative services by 10 in the morning on the day of. And you can do that by contacting Deputy Clerk at meaford.ca or calling 519-538-1060, extension 1110. An email with access information will be sent to those who register for remote participation. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes and public questions to 2 minutes. And the public can watch this meeting live via the Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel at www.meaford.ca/YouTube. And we do have a presentation today, and I'd like to invite Eamon Horan-Lunny, Director of Member and Government Relations, Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, to join us at this point at the podium, if he is here. It's going to be virtual. Oh, okay. All right. I wonder, do we want to reverse the order of deputations and presentations, or would you like me to just? Okay. Do we have our deputer present? Is it going to be you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, or is someone speaking? No, it's Joseph Leung speaking on your thing, and I don't see him in the. He's not here yet either. Tom, are you able to do that? Okay, well, why don't we invite you to the podium then, and we'll hear your deputation then on the Deputy Mayor's motion coming forward later in the program for the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. And is his mic on there? There we go. Oh, still off.
Testing.
There we go.
It is my intention to ask a question rather than make Joseph's deputation. So since he's not here, I saw him this morning. I think he had an intention of being here, but I'll go ahead and ask my question if I may, and it'll be a stand-in for his deputation if he
Sure.
doesn't show.
And I believe our question's limited to 2 minutes. Anyway, we're good. And so listen up, Deputy Mayor, and and you go ahead, Tom.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. I'm Tom Buck of Save Georgian Bay. I'm one of our 3 directors. It's been a while since I've been here in front of you, and it's always an honor to be able to talk to council. I saw the item in front of you today, consideration for membership in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Initiative cities, and I think that is an absolutely wonderful idea for you. My question is, and this was a question modeled for me by Reeve Burt Liverance in the Township of the Archipelago. He asked this question of TCE's representative, John Mickelson. He said, do you know You know, because if you take this membership on, there are responsibilities that come with that membership. It's commitments to clean water and commitments to the environment that may be above and beyond what you perceive to be your commitments now. So the question that Reeve Liverance asked, in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement between the US and Canada, what is the acceptable level of toxic discharge into the Great Lakes? And I'm wondering if you know the answer to that.
Do you wish to answer that or?
Your worship, yes, thank you, and welcome, Tom. It's good to see you here in front of council today. And thank you for asking that question. And no, I don't have an answer, but that's part of the reason I'd like to see our municipality become a member of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative so that we can take advantage of their expertise and their knowledge and their ability to advocate, because I think this sort of a third level, so to speak, could be very valuable to us as we go forward, assuming that we do go into the environmental assessment process. I'm looking forward, if council agrees, to being able to call on this particular group to assist us as we go forward and to answer questions like this.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I appreciate it. And I would hope that would be the commitment that council in entirety would have. John Mickelson also did not know the answer to that question. Reeve Liverance answered it for him. It's zero. The answer is zero toxic discharge into the Great Lakes. That's important. That's important. Thank you very much for allowing me to ask that question today.
Very, very welcome. And if you, hopefully you'll be able to stay and hear the presentation from the association or the initiative, I think it's called. Do we have, yes, okay. So at this time, I'm going to call on Eamon Horan-Lunny, who is Director of Member and Government Relations, Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, to speak to us. Can you hear us, Eamon?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Your Worship.
Okay, you have the floor, and you have, I believe he has 10 minutes.
Thank
for
you,
a
Your Worship.
presentation.
Can you see me? And are you able to see the presentation we have? Or is it already up on your screens?
It's up on the screen. We can't see you. But
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to fix that. But while we're doing that, in conscious of time, I might just move forward with the presentation while I try to get my camera to work. First of all, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative has been around for 20 years. We're developed by mayors for mayors. And we have focused for the last 20 years on issues around water and the environment that joins Canadians and Americans, the 8 US states and the 2 Canadian provinces that make up the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Basin. So if you're following along, this would be slide number 2, who we are. Going to the next slide, it just has a very quick map of how diverse our membership is. It shows that we go all the way from Duluth, Minnesota to Rimouski, Quebec. Our membership includes over 20 million people in cities like Chicago, Montreal, Trois-Rivières, and small communities that you'd be hard for us to find on the map, like Saint-Onicette, Quebec, and Racine, Wisconsin. We have a wide variety of large, urban, rural, remote communities that are directly on the Great Lakes, as well as communities that are inland from the Great Lakes in the overall watershed. Next slide. We have been successful over the last 20 years because we've advocated and we've collaborated and we've educated. We've advocated for programs and policies in Canada and the United States. You can see this in some of our success, like the brand new funding from the federal government on freshwater programming, which I'll go into a little bit later. We've collaborated. We've brought mayors and councils from Ontario, Quebec, from New York State, from Michigan, from Wisconsin and Illinois together to talk about common issues and how what's going on in your community has affected the whole watershed of your lake, the watershed of the region, but also what we can do collectively to try to alleviate pressures and problems that go from lake to lake and region to region. And a lot of this is done through education. Next slide, please. To keep things simple, we've got 4 strategic pillars, and every time we do something, we want to make sure it fits into one of these. So ecosystem and water source protection, water equity, climate change and coastal resilience, and of course, economic transformation. I'm sorry, the presentation you have, they look a little bit wonky, but they looked great when we sent them. These 4 pillars are what tie all the municipalities in the region together. Because what happens in one community can affect the next one over. Ecosystem and source water protection is critical, because as much time and money your community puts into something, if a community upstream from you is doing something that's not helpful, it makes it very hard to make progress. Water equity. This is definitely an issue right now in both Ontario and in many US states. How do you ensure that everyone has access to affordable, fresh water that they can drink, fish, and swim in? And the reason we talk about those 3 things, because if you can drink, fish, and swim in, that means your economy can grow, your society can grow, and that you can have affordable housing. Climate change and coastal resilience. I know your community has faced this more than most. The amount of 50-year floods, 100-year floods, extreme weather events that are coming to your community are causing more damage than your tax base could ever deal with. And at the same time, we've got new challenges with the lack of ice in the winter. We no longer have our shores protected from the fierce winter storms, and the amount of erosion that's taking place on all the Great Lakes and in many of the tributaries is dramatically more than we've planned for, and we have the capacity to deal with. So how can local governments work with provincial and state governments and the 2 federal governments to develop new programs and policies to address the economic and environmental challenges brought about by climate change? And that brings us to economic transformation. As we are investing in the future, how do we invest in such a way that when we're rebuilding in a sustainable way, we're rebuilding in a way that will drive new economic growth and new economic opportunities, and will allow your community, hopefully, some new revenue options, so you have new fiscal capacity to deal with the source water protection, the water equity issue, and of course, the climate change issues. Next slide. We'll go in a little more detail. So we've had some success on this. 2023 was the first time in a generation the federal government got really involved in fresh water. Some other environmental groups, if you search online, call it the 2023 budget, the freshwater budget by the federal government. And I bring this forward because in this budget, the creation of the Canada Water Agency also infused $1 billion in new federal programming for fresh water from coast to coast to coast. Historically, the federal government has focused on salt water, and they've left the provinces to the fresh water. After years of advocacy, including some work that we did with the Action Plan 2020-2030 on the Great Lakes and Action Plan 2020-2030 on the St. Lawrence River, we really show the federal government that if they want to meet their environmental and their economic goals going forward, they have to get re-involved in fresh water. And they did last year. There's a lot more to do, but the creation of the Canada Water Agency is allowing the one-stop shop for us as water advocates to go to the federal government, and the Canada Water Agency, which is overseeing this $1 billion in new funding, works with 19 federal government agencies and departments on all types of freshwater programming and policy. You may have noticed this with the new flood mapping programming that's been rolled out across Ontario, which is driven by the federal government. You may have noticed this with the new Natural Resources Canada coastal resilience program that for the first time is allowing freshwater communities to apply for coastal resilience. They say coastal resilience because historically these programs have only been for saltwater communities, but now they're allowing Great Lakes and St. Lawrence communities to apply for it. And of course, the dedicated funding for the Great Lakes themselves of $440 million. This is just some of the new programming and funding that's available to communities across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region that we've been advocating for and bringing results on. And of course, we go into water equity, climate change, coastal and economic development. We are working with member communities across in Canada and the United States on how we develop new programs and policies that federal governments and provincial governments can be engaged with to help local governments, such as municipalities like yourself and First Nations communities, to get the um, the skill set, the knowledge, the technical support, and the financial support to start implementing programs and new construction in your community. Next slide, please. We do this through policy and advocacy, networking, and of course, strategic work. We have developed mayor's commissions, and the mayor of the Blue Mountain, Andrea, is one of our co-chairs of one of our commissions on water equity. We usually have one co-chair from Ontario, one co-chair from Quebec on the Canadian side, and of course on the American side, we usually have two co-chairs on our various commissions. We have advocacy days where we have led advocacy days in Ottawa. It's and in Washington. In Ottawa, for the last 7 years now, we've done a Great Lakes St. Lawrence Day on Parliament Hill, and we've worked with all political parties in Ottawa to whether it be Green Party, the NDP, the Conservative Party, or the Liberal Party to look at how they can advocate for freshwater program and policy within their own political parties, within their committees, and within their various ministerial roles. Networking, of course, we've had a number of events. We've training sessions for webinars. We worked with municipal staff on projects and programming so that municipal staff have more resources when they go to apply for funding, and help them work directly with federal and provincial departmental officials on how to apply for funding. And of course, our annual conference, which was last month, which had over 250 elected officials from all eight Great Lakes states and the two provinces there. And of course, we have a wonderful group of elected officials that make up our board of directors, our regional councils, and we have one just for Ontario. They meet every 2 months, the Ontario group, to talk about Ontario specific issues and talk about how and share information. Our next meeting will be at AMO, the day before AMO. So of course, all are welcome to that. And of course, we do surveys. If I could do the next one, please. I can't stress how much the Canada Water Agency is a fundamental change for the government of Canada. For over 20 years now, or close to 30 years, the federal government has stepped back further and further from freshwater programming and advocacy. And we can go into the history, it doesn't really matter. The fact that all political parties have so far been very open to the creation of the Canada Water Agency, and the fact that it has a dedicated fund for 10 years, which is unheard of in Ottawa, but 10 years of funding, with dedicated funding for the Great Lakes. This is also part of a bigger move by the government of Canada with a national adaptation strategy. And I'm not sure if your community has been part of this, but the federal government's been giving money to all the provinces. And I know it's been making its way down to many municipalities to work on flood hazard identification and really detailed flood mapping across the whole country. And of course, new funding for resilient communities, including fresh water. Now, we're fully aware that municipal governments are asked to do more and more with less and less. And we were just at a meeting this morning with York Region, and we were talking with a number of their elected officials about the new provincial rules and regulations around housing and the fiscal challenges that all municipalities are facing. We really want to get as much data as possible so that as the next round of negotiations between the government of Canada and all the provinces, including the province of Ontario and the province of Quebec, for the 2025-2026 infrastructure negotiations, that we have as much data as possible to talk about what the real cost of fresh water is. There's some very good jobs being done through the strategic infrastructure survey that I'm sure your staff have been part of, where you've been tracking what your municipal assets are along the waterfront and your drinking water assets. But the real challenge is all the other assets that are along the waterfront. What is going to be the cost to protect them so that we are not losing housing and businesses to climate change as communities face issues around erosion and extreme weather events. If I go to the next one, please. So we'd love to work with your community on various ways about how we can support you and how we can make sure that you've got a strong voice in both Queen's Park and Ottawa and that you're working with your other Canadian colleagues across Ontario and Quebec and learning from our American colleagues about how things are done throughout the whole basin. We do have some um, uh, programs like the Weggie Award, which is really targeted to small and medium-sized communities where we can showcase some of the innovation that you've done. I think the last 3 years, there's been at least one Ontario winner on the Weggie Awards about what those small communities have done to show environmental stewardship or environmental innovation, and then showcase what you're doing to all the other communities around. Of course, there's some discounts, but what we really are offering is extra support for your staff, extra advice for your elected officials, and hopefully work with you to find out how we can get more funding for your community, either through specific applications or as we try to develop a new fiscal framework, ideally in the 2025, 2026 renegotiations of infrastructure. And I believe that's the last one. I'm open to any questions, but I'm conscious of time. So thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you today. And I'm happy to take any questions or address any concerns.
We have some questions around the horseshoe.
Yeah.
Councillor Heurig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. Very interesting, and actually in many ways, it's very encouraging. I do have a question. So I currently sit as chair of the Great Sable Conservation Authority, and Councillor Bell is also on that organization with me. I was coincidentally at a Conservation Ontario Council meeting, virtual meeting this morning prior to this.
Yeah.
And we were discussing, so you made a lot of comments about the federal support, and then you did get into provincial. And obviously with the building mechanisms that are being encouraged, we've already seen a number of things that are, as you said, municipalities are having more and more limitations placed upon them financially as well as structurally. So I guess my question is, what we discussed this morning at that level was Bill 185, obviously being the most recent, and talking about further limitations to conservation authorities in terms of some of their powers and the ministers having veto power on some things.
Yeah.
But I guess the bigger question is just federal versus provincial commitment. And this is obviously an opinion, but we are very serious about our water concerns in this municipality. And Grey Sable is very concerned because the watershed is obviously feeding that. So with everything that's happening with the provincial government and everything they're downloading regulatory, how do you really feel that the federal versus the provincial commitment is to walking the walk is going to be the best way I'm going to say it with these initiatives?
So first of all, I apologize. I can't seem to find a way to turn on my camera. I've been all over the screen while we're talking. I apologize. Part one. Part two, conservation.
I'll just let you know, unfortunately, our system is not able to do that. We can receive presentations, but we cannot unfortunately do a live feed, so it's not you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. The second thing you mentioned was Conservation Ontario. Earlier this year at Roma, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Conservation Ontario. And this is something our board directed us to do last year, and we're doing more of. Historically, we focused on federal issues. We are realizing we need to do more provincial work. So I'm using it as a bridge. Just give me a moment if you don't mind. So this year we've started partnering with more provincial themed organizations like Conservation Ontario. And like I said, we did an MOU with them earlier this year. And now working with Conservation Ontario, we have jointly applied for a number of new federal programs, this new federal funding. We haven't heard back if we've been successful. We're pretty optimistic though. So we are working with Conservation Ontario and a wide selection of communities across Ontario to try to get new federal funding in there. But the reason we're doing this is to use these as pilot projects and showcase what's possible and try to showcase, like, if this stretch of shoreline, let's say 10 kilometers is going to cost $1 million, How much more do we need to be funding for the all of Ontario to be safe and secure as we move forward? Your question about Ontario versus the federal government, or provincial versus federal. Historically, we've been asked to deal with the federal government, so it's only recently we've been getting involved with the provincial government. I would have to defer to our board as to how they feel about the provincial government's engagement. But we've shown our success with both Conservatives, NDP, and Liberals and Green Party MPs and at the federal level that they see a way forward for freshwater policy there. We are very conscious at the provincial level, and we get this a lot from our American friends, and we're looking at the future federally where politics might be shifting in a different direction. So how do you communicate to people that might not think the environment's the number one priority, that they need to spend time and money and energy on the environment? And that's part of the thinking behind what we're doing on the economic transformation. If we need to protect our homes from erosion, if we need to protect our businesses from erosion, we need to have strong erosion programming to make sure homes aren't washed away and we don't slide backwards on how many homes are in Ontario. So there's a real economic argument to me that if we are going to be doing some of this work, how do we do it in the most efficient way possible to build for the future? Right now, the federal government is spending over $2 billion a year on disaster relief. So after a flood happens, they're spending $2 billion a year. They don't see that as sustainable going forward. So they're already looking at how do you start spending that $2 billion proactively to reduce the amount of natural disasters and the economic impact of them. And that's the type of message we can bring to other governments, regardless of their political spectrum. Like, we're spending money. How do we spend it in the most efficient way possible to have the most impact on our community? And for our communities to be for our communities to be successful, they need to have safe, affordable, accessible water. And if that means we have to look at how we've redone our waterfronts, whether it be an urban waterfront or a industrial waterfront or a rural waterfront, we have to look at that. If we have to look at our flood mapping and understand that as climate changes, areas that were once great to build a home or build a business are now in floodplains because of changing environments. Well, one, we need that data, and two, then we have to figure out how to mitigate those floods so we're not having to rebuild or repair buildings repeatedly from environmental damage. So I'm conscious that I've not declared the federal versus provincial who's doing what, but what we're hearing from our membership and what we're trying to advocate right now is that regardless of the political stripe of any government, there is a strong argument to be made that if we protect our water, it's going to have a strong economic, social, and environmental protection going forward for our society. And that's just good business. So that's what we're doing going forward, if that's okay. Yep.
Thank you for the answer. I'm not sure I got a real commitment about where the province falls on that, but I fully appreciate that it's kind of a new territory for you to tackle. So it'll be great to have that kind of advocacy regarding that. Mike, if I have a follow-up, I'm just curious. So Grace Hubble, the end of last year, National Resources Canada, they offered a grant of $25 million towards 20 projects. And it was proposing to partner through Conservation in Ontario on a project to produce one of 6 Great Lake pilot studies. What Grace Hubble did is they wanted to participate with the other municipalities in our region that have coastline on the Great Lakes, and we've applied for that. Is that $25 million separate? Is NRCan part of that billions of dollars you were talking about that the feds are throwing at this, or is that a different direction? Because it works out really well. If we do end up getting that grant, we NRCan cover 75%. So literally our financial involvement was only going to be $15,000 over 3 years, which is nothing for this kind of a study. But I'm just curious, again, was NRCan part of that overall federal piggy bank, or is that a separate? And do you advocate for those, in favor of those kinds of initiatives?
So I believe you're talking about the Natural Resources Coastal Resilience Communities Fund. And that
Correct.
fund has historically been for saltwater, and then this year they included freshwater. Now, they did include new additional funding when they allowed freshwater communities to apply. I'd have to double check with the Canada Water Agency if that's part of the overall $1 billion. No one's ever asked that direct question. I believe it is, but I'd have to verify that before I said something definitively. But it's part of a bigger step of the federal government where they have a whole of government approach to fresh water, which was not there before. You got the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which is doing a blue economy strategy, which includes not just saltwater, but freshwater all the way through the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence. And how can we, for lack of a better word, monetize our water in a way that we have economic opportunities in the freshwater zone, which historically they've left to the provinces. You've got Natural Disaster Canada looking at flood mapping. You've got, NRCan now allowing freshwater programming, like we just talked about. So, like I said, there's 19 federal departments and agencies that deal with freshwater, and for the first time in modern times, they're all trying to work in a coordinated, disciplined way, and they're also trying to work with their provincial counterparts to make sure that when they do a program federally, there's some provincial partnerships wherever possible to move things forward. So to answer your question, is that new funding available through the $1 billion? I believe so, but I need to double check.
Any other questions around the horseshoe? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner, and thank you for the presentation. Can you tell me in a nutshell, does the membership fees all go to staffing and advocacy, or do you actually do physical work on shorelines or water quality?
The membership fees does go to staffing and advocacy, but that staffing and advocacy has created new funding, like this new $1 billion in Canada for freshwater programming. And I can say that that new programming is a direct result of work we did between 2017 and 2021, where we surveyed and consulted across Ontario and Quebec, made 30 recommendations to Environment Canada. I remember we released those reports in March of 2020, literally 3 days before COVID was announced. And we did our final report in June that year as COVID was underway. Now, COVID did cause a bit of a blip, but almost all those recommendations that we created have now become new federal programming, new federal funds, and new things that you can apply to. It took longer than we hoped for, but there was that 3-year window where everything in political Ottawa and bureaucratic Ottawa was kind of sidelined. But the 2023 budget was called by more than one group the freshwater budget, with this new programming, these new policies, and these new funds that you can apply to directly so your community can get money. So what does your membership fees get? We are looking, especially this year, as we do economic transformation, of how can we get staff into the different regions of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence, and how can we work directly with municipal staff and municipal governments to make things happen. So one thing we're doing this summer, and we're just trying to work out the dates with the Canada Water Agency, is we're trying to get federal officials that approve funding grants to sit down with municipal staff well before the applications are due and have conversations about what type of programs and policies your city wants to put forward, and have a real frank discussion about what is likely to be approved, what's not likely to be approved, how can we combine a variety of different applications together so that let's say 3 or 4 different cities and different area codes can work together in a similar type of project, which makes it easier for the federal government to approve. So we are this year looking to get more boots on the ground and more direct action, working directly with your staff to make things happen. And that's what your membership is paying for.
Councillor Bell.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. One question on your slide on networking and learning. There's one bullet point there that says your annual conference.
I take from the membership that that annual conference could be located in the United States. It could be located in Quebec. It
Yep.
could be located at a far north region on Ontario. What would be a typical fee that is asked to be paid in order to attend a conference?
We just had our AGM in Montreal in May. And sorry, I don't have them in front of me. I believe the fee in Canadian dollars is about $1,000 for the 3-day conference. Now, I do know there was early fees and there's other ways of getting discounts. So I'd have to sorry, I don't have it in front of me. But I'd say between $700 and $1,000 to attend one of those events. That being said, when we do our advocacy days on Parliament Hill and the ones we hope to do in Queen's Park and other events, there historically has not been fees for that. If there are meals and things like that, there might be a fee to offset some costs that way. But like we did an event in Meaford, sorry, not Meaford, sorry, in the Blue Mountain in March. And I think we had 32 elected officials of that. And we also had federal members of parliament, members of provincial parliaments. We also had Conservation Ontario there and some other stakeholders. And I don't think there's a fee for that for anyone to attend, although there was food included. So we do try to keep our costs down, but the conference, I have to double check on our website, but I think it's between $700 to $1,000, depending if you did early admission and things like that to attend.
Deputy Mayor is next, and then Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Eamon, for being with us today. And I did have the privilege of attending the event in the Blue Mountains, and there was no cost to any of us to do that. I wish we'd been part of your organization back in 2019 when we did suffer quite severe erosion here on our waterfront. We lost in places 6-8 feet and even more. And if our council agrees to support membership today, I'd be interested to know if, you might have been able to help us in that regard. We did approach the province for some financial support at the time and did not receive any. And my second question for you, kind of coming right to the elephant in the room, and I really appreciate that you have suggested what I'll call more personal support for communities. You talked about being available to staff and to members of council, and you'll be aware that we are facing a huge project here in Meaford, the proposal by TC Energy to build a pump storage plant within our municipality. And that's a big part of the reason why I have the motion before council today to join your organization, because we are hopeful that you can assist us with some education and some advocacy if necessary. And we want to take advantage of your knowledge and expertise in our fresh water here in Georgian Bay to assist us through that process, assuming that TC gets to the environmental impact assessment phase. So I'll just leave that with you for comment.
Yeah, so this is one of the things where being part of a national and international organization, you really get to see how different jurisdictions deal with the same challenge. Talking about the 2019 floods, there's an example where in the province of Ontario, they did not declare a state of emergency, whereas Quebec did. I have the good fortune of living in Ottawa, which is right on the border of Ontario and Quebec, with the same natural disaster going through the flooding there. You can see how the two different provinces completely, their reaction was very different. Quebec declared a state of emergency, and by doing that, it meant that homeowners and municipalities had access to provincial and federal funds to rebuild and do things after the fact. And I know the province of Quebec and a number of municipalities use those funds to then approach homeowners who have been flooded more than once and say, let's move you. Let's find a way to take this stretch of land that has been flooded more than once and redevelop it in a way that is more sustainable and takes the risk away from you as a homeowner. And part of that was, they built new homes to move these people into, and then they took those areas that were repeatedly flooded and turned them into either soft shores or soft coasts that could adapt to the new climate reality. And when it comes to so this type of thing that you'll be able to talk about with your fellow mayors and fellow city staff across the whole region, how are different jurisdictions dealing with the same disaster? What are some best practices, and what are some things that, in terms of public policy or in terms of programming or in terms of funding, are other people doing differently that we can learn from and or try to put pressure on one government or another government to say, well, if that's working in jurisdiction A, why can it not work in jurisdiction B? When it comes to other specific projects, we are happy to work with any community on what their projects are. Of course, we are organizations. We would have to defer to what the organization wants in terms of how strong a public position. But in terms of sharing best practices, learning about advocacy, and working with staff, we're happy to do that, to share, to provide whatever support we can do on any specific application and or issue that's in your community.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Eamon, for your presentation. Very interesting subjects. I do want to ask you a question concerning water extraction from the Great Lakes, and I'll run by two specific projects to you. One that occurred about 20 years ago. That was a pipeline 2 feet in diameter that ran from Collingwood, Ontario to Alliston, down to the Honda plant in Alliston. A very good economic benefit to Collingwood and to the new Tecumseh area. So that's one project. The other one, I think, was about 10 years ago. It happened in the state of Wisconsin, a city there of about 70,000, I think about 30 kilometers inland, called Waukesha or Waukesha. I'm not sure how to pronounce their name. But anyway, they ran a pipeline to extract drinking water for their city. Understand their natural in-ground water was high with radium concentration. So those were a couple of withdrawals of water from the Great Lakes that seem to be beneficial projects. I'm hoping for all. What is the city's initiative's general opinion or policy on that type of thing? Now, that's only two projects. I assume there have been more. And I guess to add on to my question is I see American cities, especially Chicago and to a degree Detroit, which are the northern point of the American heartland, and we're hearing quite often in the southwestern United States that they're running out of water. Now, that doesn't involve the Great Lakes yet, but what's how does the initiatives deal with it's hypothetical, it's not happening big time yet, but I think it only stands to reason that, hey, look, it's just a matter of time. Can you help me on that?
So we are a member-based organization. We will take our leadership from our members. So I can't tell you what we'll do in the future, but I can tell you historically, we have been opposed to water being removed out of the Great Lakes Basin and into another watershed. I think your first example was within the province of Ontario, so it may have gone from one Great Lakes basin to another Great Lakes basin. Historically, we have not been that active on those because it's still within the Great Lakes St. Lawrence overall basin. Our real challenge has been when it moves from the Great Lakes Basin to the Mississippi or another water basin. And then your second example, I think up in Wisconsin, I'm not aware of the exact example you're talking about, but I'm aware of other ones. So I'm making an assumption here. It was leaving the Great Lakes Basin and going into the Mississippi. Historically, we've been opposed to that, and our membership's been very strong on that historically. It is a little challenging in some of those border zones. And I'll use the city of Chicago as an example where I don't have a map in front of me, but I think you only have to go in like 2 kilometers from the lakefront in the city of Chicago before you're in the other watershed for the Mississippi. So there already has been historical communities that have gone back and forth, but overall, we are opposed to that. And this past March, we were at the Great Lakes Day on Capitol Hill in Washington, and we were working with our partners from the Mississippi Rivers Alliance, which is a series of mayors that go from Louisiana all the way up to Minnesota. And historically, that has been the watershed that Great Lakes water goes into, from the Great Lakes into the Mississippi. That group of mayors in the Mississippi watershed, which if you look on the map is an incredibly large watershed, they are getting extremely adamant about no water diversion from one watershed to the next, because they're now getting pressure on their western coast for water to be diverted to the Colorado and other west-facing rivers in the far southwest. So people that used to be, well, who've always been supportive of our cause, but never very active, they're becoming much more active on this issue across the US about how you keep water within a watershed and try to push back on those pressures that you talked about in the Southwest, in the Sun Belt, and in the Southeast, where whether it be Arizona that is so hot and dry, or Texas where the population is expanding and they don't have a lot of fresh water, or even the other zones where things are there's a widespread consensus amongst many municipal leaders in the Midwest and in within our organization that keep the water in their own watershed, and that's the way forward. And we're going to continue to advocate for that as long as this is what the membership asks for, and I assume that's what we're going to be doing going forward. If I could just add one anecdote, I was talking to a U.S. Congresswoman about a year ago, and she brought a number of Congress people from the South and from the East Coast of America up to the Great Lakes. And her takeaway was that most of these people in the US, especially in these new power-hungry areas of the South when they hear lake, they think of a small lake. They have no concept of how big these lakes are. So when they are brought up to Michigan or Ohio and they see a Great Lake and you can't see the other side, they're just flabbergasted by it, because if you look at an American map, they just show the American coastline. They'll show the whole lake. So I do know we have a lot of allies in Ohio and New York and in Michigan and in Wisconsin who are doing everything they can to educate and advocate to their Democrat and Republican colleagues about what the Great Lakes are and really what the opportunity is up here. So yeah, I just wanted to add that little bit.
Thank you, Eamon. I'm just going to ask CAO Buckham, do you have any question or comment for our speaker? Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to move on. Thank you, Eamon, very much for your participation today.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is council inquiries. Councilor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner, and this would be to Jessica. Jessica, is there any headway on bridges 21 and 22? I was down there today, nothing happening.
Through the chair, I am understanding that the contracts are awarded, but I'm not sure of what the next steps in the project are, but I can definitely follow up with you on that.
Councilor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is to Jessica. I've noticed that there's been some really good work being done on the Sydenham and St. Vincent town line. And where I'm talking, if my fellow councilors want to see a map, it's on page 39 of our package of 57. And there's a stretch of road there that literally for decades upon decades has been virtually impassable. The local farming community needing to get to their land with their tractors and so on caused such deep ruts. They were just extremely deep, and it caused a center area that when folks would visit at Coffin Ridge, and then they would look up on their map about how can I get back to the town of Meaford, they ended up going down there and they literally would just bottom out. And I'm seeing a really endeavored work on that particular stretch. And I'm just inquiring as to, you know, we're doing it now.
For someone who lives locally there, that's great to see that kind of work and the money being spent to do it. So Jessica, can you basically give a comment, please, on at this time, the endeavor on that particular stretch of road, because the work that's being done is quite lovely.
Through the chair. So I think we're talking about the summer maintenance section of that particular road. So we did have, I'd say a bit of, but a fairly substantial washout on the hill there this recently. So the maintenance that's happening there is to try and permanently fix that portion of the hill so that we're not continuously maintaining it, as you mentioned. So it has some ditching incorporated into the work that's happening there to try to divert the water from running like right down the very center and causing the problems that we see. So that is what's happening on that section of road.
Well, thank you for that, Jessica. And what I said about visitors coming to a location, my neighbors often get calls from people driving some very snappy looking automobiles, and the local farming community are not a towing agency, and they refuse to go down and pull on someone's vehicle whose bumper alone. So they just don't. So it's nice to see that the work crew is down there. They're filling that in. And for my fellow councillors, that area is red clay. And when it washes out, it makes a ravine. And the damage that could occur to someone not knowing and just driving down the road. Thank you for the work being done. And hopefully folks can just make their way around without getting into trouble. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor Peaveny.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm sorry, Director Wiley, you're on the hot spot again. Increasingly, I've been noticing on my walks in the morning along Bayfield Street that there seems to be a significant amount of traffic, and as on most of our streets, some of it is not very respectful of speed. And my worry is with the splash pad open now and the little beach across the street and walkers and fishermen and so on, that I wonder if we should have a discussion about lowering that speed limit to 40 on that section, or perhaps putting up some children at play signs or some other type of traffic controls, speed bumps or something of that nature. So I think I'm potentially talking about a notice of motion here that I'll bring forward later in the meeting, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on Bayfield Street at this point.
Through the chair, I think, I mean, notice of motion is perfectly fine. We can look at opportunities along there. If I'm not mistaken, last year or the year before, but I have a terrible memory, so don't hold me to that. We did put pylons down the center median because I think it was increased traffic diverted down that way from a construction project. And my understanding is it was fairly successful. So to your point, maybe it's worth looking at different alternatives to traffic calming for that particular section of road. I cringe a bit at speed bumps because there's a lot of other alternatives that might be more effective. So yeah, that's a good point that maybe it's something that we can look at a different way to try to calm the speed in that section. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. One more for Jessica. Before I ask you, Jessica, I just want to thank Councillor Bell for mentioning the town line up in his area. I had the pleasure of driving down that road. I guess we got all the way from the deviation down to Johnson Harbor on that road about a month ago. It was a challenge. So if there's improvements being done, that's great. Jessica, the Leaf project, how are things coming along there? Are we making progress on that stretch of reconstruction on the?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to say that from my understanding, it sounds like the project is moving along well. There have been a few hiccups, as all projects have. But my understanding of where the project and its timeline is that we're nearing completion. So I know that there are still a few things to finish, but from my understanding, it's going all right.
Good to hear. Deputy Mayor?
If I may, your worship, I just wanted to add to Jessica's comments. I was out there last Friday afternoon and had a good look-see at where they're at with the construction because I'd been contacted by some residents in that area. And I think, yes, the construction certainly seemed to be progressing well. I think the biggest concern is the ditches. People were not accustomed to having a ditch along their front yard, and that will just be a little bit of an adjustment for folks. And as I tried to reassure them, the project isn't done yet, so it's hard to visualize sometimes what something's going to look like when it is all. I assume it'll be sodded and completed in in a professional manner so that it will have a better appearance then than it does now when things are a little bit muddy. So we'll wait and see.
Okay, if that's it for inquiries, sorry, did you have a comment?
I feel like I've always got comments, but yes, it will be hydro seeded. I just wanted to provide that clarification in case someone was very disappointed that it would be sodded. But it will be, you're right, it'll look completely different with hydro seed than it does now. Because I feel like the change there is definitely difficult for people. Like I can understand. I think that's the biggest challenge. So thank you for the communication on that point too.
Okay, moving on then to the consent agenda. There's only one item, so I need a mover and a seconder to put that on the table. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Deputy Mayor Keaveney. And the recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve the transfer to and from reserves and reserve funds as itemized in Report Financial 2024-10 non-budgeted year-end transfers. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to items for consideration. First one is the recommendation is to transfer $76,784.81 from the Roads Reserve Fund to pay for a portion of the roadside safety improvements on Tom Thompson Lane and Concession Road A. Two, approve the use of the 2024 Roadside Safety Devices Capital Fund to pay for a portion of the roadside safety improvements to Tom Thompson Lane and Concession Road A. Three, approve the award of tender Structure Bridge 002 replacement to McPherson Andrews Contracting Limited for $1,291,732.78, including the municipality's non-refundable allocation of HST. And four, authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the necessary agreement. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Bell and seconded by Councillor Bartley. Discussion on that? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, yes, this is a big number, $1.3 million. You read the report, and there's money that was needed just to help the folks that live there maintain access to their property. And yes, the bridge was built in 1920, and we've seen that there was an investigation into the historical value of such a structure. And the report says that really there are other structures in Ontario which were built in the same time period. So it's one of those situations where in order to have folks get access to their property, this bridge is $1.3 million. And we've seen bridge costs be like that before. I personally wish that there were more people who live down that area. But when you own property on the other side, that's where you are. It is our responsibility, I believe, to have people stay connected. There are a number of options that staff looked into. And I remember when we had the previous CAO, I think there was conversation even about expropriation of property. Just what's it going to cost us? And there's a cost. So the choice today, which is recommended, item 4, to award the contract, I can support doing that down on concession A. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate your comments, Councillor Bell, for sure. We read in the report that Side Road 24 will be closed for the construction period, so I'm just curious to know about timeline, Jessica. Do we have a sense of how quickly this bridge can get completed and what penalties are there in the contract? We've seen some bridges unfortunately go way over budget and way over timelines recently, so I'm just curious to know if we've got this one tied down pretty tight.
Through the chair, truthfully, I'll probably have to get back to you with that information as well. On timelines and exactly what we can expect out of it. I can say that we will have it tied down, but I honestly don't know the ins and outs on what the timing for that will look like. But I can provide an update to all of council with the same information.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner and Jessica. A couple questions. I know we're picking on you today and I'm sorry. I read in the report, you're going to try to keep the Thompson Trail open during the bridge construction. How is that possible, or am I reading it wrong?
So through the chair, and this isn't trying to pass the buck, but I actually wasn't the author of the report, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
I if there's a lot of questions about that, I can take them and provide the information back. So you can pick on me all you want, but I have to have a little bit of time to get you the answer.
Yeah, I was curious about that one. And I guess the construction is similar to the northern construction that's going to happen on 21 and 22. It's going to be steel brought in after they put some cement in. And it looks like they're going to, instead of the cement footings being left, they're going to leave the timber frame footings left to hold back the cement. I was curious on, am I reading it all wrong? Question above that talks about the roadside safety. So basically that stretch of property 200 yards north of the bridge, we're going to put guide rails for the last 10 years.
Mhm.
Is that part of this also, or are we going to look at that? So there's a handful.
I was just going to say, I know that Joel is here, so maybe.
Thank you, through the mayor. I will say first for the, yes, the bridge would be removed and what would remain would be the wooden piles that are left behind, and they would be cut off at an elevation near the water or just underneath the water line, and they would remain. There's not a lot of value in removing those. The new abutments would be set behind that so that we're ending up with a structure that is longer at the end, but I think that answers your first question. Sorry, could you repeat the second question for me?
It had something to do with roadside safety. That's just the guardrails at the bridge, or are we going to extend 200-300 yards north of the bridge that we've been trying to do for 10 years?
Through Mary, yes, it includes guide rail work down Tom Thompson Lane that runs next to the creek. It's not just on the structure. And that's why you'll see in the report that it is separated out as to what the bridge costs are and what the guide rail costs are.
Thank you. We've been looking for that for years and it is necessary down.
Councillor Forder.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. My question may be to Jessica again. My apologies.
It's all good.
But looking around that bridge, there's quite a number of fairly mature trees. And I'm just curious to know, are those trees at risk to being removed because of the heavy machinery that might be used to do this project? So what is the plan with regards to preserving the trees, or if they have to be removed, is there a plan to replace those trees to offset that? Just to get your thoughts and comments, please.
Through your mayor, you may have noticed already that some of the larger trees that are very next to the structure have been removed already. I believe there might be one more tree that's approximately 1 foot in diameter that may still need to be removed, but the trees that are needed to be removed are generally removed already, and they are necessary due to digging at the structure, the root systems are going to be damaged, unfortunately, and it is necessary. We have not included plans for replacement of trees. If that's something that council desires, we can certainly do that. I think we have to be careful about planting trees near structures. The trees near the structures generally pose a risk to the structure moving forward. As they grow, they can actually push on the structure, causing damage or other issues.
Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. The next recommendation is one, approve the award of tender Transportation 2024 01 and 02, 2024 low-class bituminous resurfacing and micro resurfacing to Duncor Enterprises, Inc. for $596,768.57, including the municipality's non-refundable allocation of HST. And two, authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the necessary agreement. Mover and a seconder for that, moved by Councillor Forder and seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Any questions or discussion here? If you're ready to vote, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Item C, the recommendation is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve a heritage permit for 54 Syke Street North to allow a projecting commercial sign subject to the following conditions. One, that the sign is installed with minimal damage to the brick facade, and two, that an encroachment agreement or similar permit is issued by the municipality if required. Mover and seconder. Councillor Urick and Deputy Mayor Keaveney. Any questions or discussion, or do you want to, I see we have Denise ready to present on that, so thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't actually have anything to really add. I think it's a pretty simple report. There's two similar reports and both of them recommend approval and just bringing forward the recommendations of the Heritage Committee. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions that council might have if it's not clear.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Ms. McCarl. I like this idea. I don't have any problem with that. I'm looking at the sign, the dimensions of it, 3 feet long, 1.6 high, about 5 inches thick. Do we have any idea of the weight of this sign? Yeah, it looks 5 inches thick now. I'm frankly worried about the weight of the sign and the attachment to that's a single brick immediately behind it, and I just wonder how heavy it is, and that concerns me.
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's interesting, a similar question did come up in the Heritage Committee. So in this particular case, it's a good question that I don't have an answer to, but probably would become, if it's part of a building permit, there'd be more information. For the committee's perspective, what they were looking at was just the general idea related to the Heritage District, but they did have that a similar question about the safety of the sign, and were we making sure that that was looked at? And we answered that yes, we would. There was a second step, and thankfully we do happen to have Bart Toby here with us today, who could answer any building related questions. If I may not have looked at this in any detail yet, but from a general perspective, if we get into the building code type sphere, we'd advise that they probably need a permit, and they would just check with building services if they do, and make sure that it's adequately attached to the building.
Go ahead, Bart.
Thank you, Your Honor. The sign itself is large, but it's also hollow in the center. And so it's may look a lot heavier than it is. So I wouldn't be overly worried by the weight of the sign. just because it's large, but plexiglass isn't very heavy. And, you know, the tin or aluminum frame won't be overly robust. So it's not a weight issue in this particular instance. If it was more cantilevered out, you know, going on, say, a 90-degree angle out from the wall, then, you know, it'd have more loading from wind and all those type of things. But because it's mounted to the face, there's lots of holes there. It'll be lagged back through into some type of structure behind the building.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Joby for that. Having known the person who laid the bricks, at this door, at the time, there was no mention to that particular person that a sign might someday be hung on it. So, I'll just leave it at that.
Your Honor, through your Honor, I've never met a structural brick in my life. I can guarantee you that the brick won't be part of the structure holding up that sign. It may pass through the brick to get to something that is sound, but brick itself doesn't tend to actually hold any type of real strength from a shear or from a load point. But thank you.
I just may add the quality of the brick between the doors was considerably better than some of the bricks that were provided for under the windows.
Getting a history lesson this morning. Any other questions? They ready to vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And then the next one is recommendation that Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve a heritage permit for 183 Sykes Street North to allow for the construction of a carport. Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion on this one? And I see none. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And now we are ready to move into committee of the whole, unless anyone feels we might take a short recess. You're no barrel on. Okay, I see the nods. Let's go with a motion then to move into a committee of the whole. I need a mover and seconder, Councillor Forder and Councillor Bartley, and we're going into committee of the whole at 2:27 p.m. here. And the first item of business is the recommendation that Committee of the Whole receive Financial Report 2024-14 Community Improvement Plan Balance Reconciliation for information purposes. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Greenfield, seconded by Councillor Uhrig. Discussion on this. It looks like we all have read it, understand it, and are ready to say yes. All in favor? Right, thank you. The second item here is the recommendation that Committee of the Whole receive Financial Report 2024-15 Library Loan Early Paydown Analysis for information purposes. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Bartley and Deputy Mayor. And any discussion on this report? Again, I think we've all read it and understand it and appreciate it and are ready to vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Now we can move on to updates from members appointed to county council committees and local boards. And first, I'll invite Deputy Mayor Keaveney to report on county council.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. County Council last met on June the 13th. The meeting began a little bit later because there was a committee meeting prior to that regarding Rockwood Terrace. Several of us attended the 4.5-hour virtual joint Grey Highlands, Grey County Public Planning meeting on the evening before, June the 12th. And that meeting was discussing the Talisman lands. The residents out in Grey Highlands expressed many concerns, including additional traffic, lack of appropriate infrastructure such as school capacity, the assumed impacts on all the local environment, and the lack of necessary health care for the few hundred new residents that would live in this project should it go forward. Only 2 of the 54 speakers spoke positively to the application. Let's see. Council heard a delegation from Darlene DiStefano of Solutions for Attainable Living regarding the benefits of additional residential units, or ARUs as we know them, in supporting the creation of more affordable housing. The nonprofit organization is requesting grant funding from the county of $25,000 to support a backyard ARU pilot. There was not much uptake from county councils, and at this point in time, there hasn't been much uptick either from residents wanting to add ARUs to their properties. So Darlene's intentions did include education, assistance with application processes, and developing an ARU prototype. So I'm sure we'll come back to that discussion perhaps at our next meeting. Council did endorse an energy conservation and demand management plan. This plan required from municipalities by the province will review the energy performance of county buildings and will forecast future energy performances. The plan will help Gray meet the objectives of going green and gray. The focus will be on the facilities that we have the most control over, such as the admin building, our long-term care homes, and so on, for example. The intent is to find efficiencies and to require all retrofits and new structures to be green compliant. The county, as we've heard before, has an aggressive goal of being net zero by 2045. Council did support a corporate sponsorship policy report, which will be designed to assist staff with the receipt of donations. These guidelines will help to clarify naming rights, for example. Council received a high-level overview of an official plan amendment application for a property in Georgian Bluffs known as Forbes Quarry. The application seeks to increase the designated mineral extraction area on the lands from 12.5 hectares to about 88 hectares. Council received the report for information, and staff will provide an analysis and will initiate the public commenting process. 100,000 tons of aggregate are extracted from this site, and that amount will continue to be the same should the quarry be expanded. Council received a verbal update from Director of Planning Scott Taylor regarding the status of Bill 185, Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. The province has made some amendments to the proposed act. Grey County previously submitted comments on the proposed changes, some of which have been incorporated into the final document, which received royal assent on April the 10th. These changes involved which parties can appeal zoning bylaw decisions, the removal of requirements for fee refunds, and change DC allowable expenses for some of the highlights. And that was pretty much it, Your Worship, unless you wanted to add anything.
No, thank you very much. The Heritage Advisory Committee, I believe there was a meeting. Did you want to report on that to us?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So we did have a Heritage Advisory Committee, and just like the 2 heritage permit applications that we dealt with today, we had a pretty thorough discussion about that. But because that was our first official meeting, most of that meeting will pertain to training and getting everybody up to speed on the code of conduct and the operations of but very good meeting, really good people at the helm, and I'm very excited going forward there. So thank you. That's all I have to report for Heritage. Thank you.
Okay, any other boards or committees that met? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And Councillor Greenfield put his hand up at the same time, so I think I beat you too, but apologies. But the library we did have a library board meeting last week. Wasn't a huge agenda, but a couple of things of note is that we did appoint Lynn Fascinato as the full-time permanent Meaford Public Library CEO, which we are all very ecstatic about. Lynn is a tremendous asset to this municipality, and the library is in very, very good shape with Lynn as the CEO. So very, very delighted to announce that. We also did adopt the Meaford Public Library Outreach Plan for 2024 to 2026. And that's quite the document. And for those that might be listening or watching live, have a look at that. It's quite in depth, and it just shows how important and what libraries can actually do to help strengthen the community through outreach. I think that's pretty much all I have for my notes for the library. But Councillor Greenfield, if you have anything you want to add, please step in. But that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Greenfield.
Really, nothing to add to Councillor Forder's report. We did have a pump storage advisory committee meeting like on the 13th of June. I could mention a couple of things from that. Yeah, our second meeting actually of this committee started out with our deputy mayor chairing the committee. Had code of conduct training, thanks to principles integrity, went through the code of conduct and getting the impression all the committee members are pretty confident and pretty responsible with their behavioral duties on that committee. We did elect a chair and a vice chair. The chair is Doug Haslam, and the deputy chair Howard Fletcher. And coming away from this, well, even the first meeting, but the second meeting in particular, I have a good feel about this committee. I think we've got a lot of good people, and there's going to be a lot of discussion. I think it's going to take some time for things to come together, but no, I think there's going to be a good number of positives come forward.
I'd just like to say I had the pleasure in my first term of serving on both the Library Board and the Heritage Committee, and these are two really important committees working on behalf of our citizens, and I really feel that both are in very good hands, and very happy to see them moving forward, and I'll miss them too. I just need a motion now to move out of committee of the whole then. Councillor Uhrig and Deputy Mayor, and that's at 2:36 p.m. And now we have a notice. I think we do have a notice of motion coming, and I'll turn it over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm actually going to bring two this afternoon. The first one really came out of the Code of Conduct discussion from Principles Integrity at our PSAC committee. I was reminded that I believe anyway, and we'll see if council agrees, that we need to do a small amendment to our council code of conduct. Currently, it's called a transparency clause, but at this point in time, if one of us declares an interest on a particular item, that is not included in our minutes. I know the forms we fill out are signed and they're filed, but for the benefit of the public, anyone who reads our minutes, that declaration is not included. So I'd like to see that transparency clause added to our current code of conduct. So that's the first one. And the second one, as I spoke to earlier, will be in relation to Bayfield Street and any potential traffic calming measures, including a possible speed reduction to 40 kilometers an hour on that section. So we'll be asking for a staff report in that regard. So those are the two.
Okay, and now we do have a motion for decision, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Deputy Mayor, to perhaps read your motion, and I think it should be read in full. Maybe.
Would you like me to read it? Okay,
sure.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Then I will read this motion. The recommendation, whereas the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative has more than 244 municipal and regional members across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River Basin, including more than 100 municipalities in Ontario. And whereas the city's initiative works to advance the environmental, economic, and social health of communities across the basin with a focus on 4 strategic pillars, including source water and ecosystem protection, water quality and infrastructure, climate change and coastal resilience, and economic transformation. And whereas membership for the municipality would include many offerings, including support for the municipality's political priorities, recognition for innovative sustainability practices, public relations support and exposure, opportunities to apply for program funding, and for elected officials and staff to participate in various events and initiatives. And whereas the city's initiative offers 50% annual membership cost reduction to be prorated for the first year of membership for municipalities who joined by June 28th of 2024. And whereas the annual membership cost for the municipality for 2024 would be $802 with a $2,750 annual contribution starting in 2025. So 802 because it's just for the last 6 months of this year, 2024. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby directs staff to arrange that the municipality be enrolled in membership with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative for the municipality of Meaford by June 28th, 2024, and enroll the municipality annually thereafter. So I won't speak further to the motion because I think we had considerable discussion with Eamon's presentation.
I think we need a seconder so I need a seconder for the motion. Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, for bringing this forward. As we had our guest presenter at the beginning of today's council meeting, it's more than obvious that water quality, the Great Lakes, is of extreme importance to many, many people. When I read through the report, you might find this a little bit, I'll say the word strange, as I am the chair of the sustainability group. And I have concerns, and I have concerns even now after some questions were asked of the presenter. My concerns were, are we doubling up? We are fortunate, I really believe, to have the Grey Silver Conservation. And when I read through what the presenter talked about water protection, you go down Highway 26, you can see the sign out there in many places. This is a water protection zone. We have that. Grey Silver Conservation looks heavily into erosion and floodplain and mapping. We do that. That's a major component of the budget. So what I don't want to see us do is join this organization because of its importance of water when we're already got agencies that look into these areas, which I see this group's been doing it for 20 years. So, hey, they've been doing something right for a very long period of time. And I get that. I just don't want to see us join this organization and be part of it. I want to know what we're going to get out of it. I want to know that ultimately, should this council move and it be a budgetary item of 2,700 and whatever it is, Madam Deputy Mayor, that's not a big deal. It's not the money. You break that down to the taxpayers, it's going to be cents, just a few cents every year to belong to this. So it's not about the money. It's about what we would get from this. And when I asked the presenter about what an annual average fee would be to an AGM, ranging between $7,000 and $1,000, and Madam Deputy Mayor, you said you attended something and there was no cost. My question was specifically to the AGM, which would be a cost. So I also look at our policies currently, and I've never experienced this. I hope that both you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and maybe Mr. Mayor, you've attended a Federation of Canadian Municipalities AGM. That could be held in Vancouver. It could be held in Halifax. You went. And I believe our policy is for support financially to do that. I might be wrong on that, but I think that because we're a member of that, you would have support to financially attend it. If we have an AGM in this case from a non-government organization, clearly a well-organized lobbyist group who are doing great work on water, and flooding and erosion and all that. Would that lead us in the future, if a member of this council wished to go and attend that, that again could be a financial commitment from the municipality. With all that I have said, and thank you for being gracious again, Mr. Mayor, I would like to do an amendment on this proposal. I would like to amend that we do try this and that we try it for 1 year. And our initial fee for this first part, is it clear? It's like 800 and some odd dollars. I would like to try it. I would like to see what we get. And then if we are happy as a council and we see benefit and all the things that were talked about, Madam Deputy Mayor, about a project that we've got, which is on the tips of everyone's tongue in this municipality. If this group can help us with what you mentioned about erosion at the park, we've had damage with wind and erosion, even in the harbor. We've had trouble. If this group can help us for the money that we do spend, then of course I'm all for it. But at this point, it's my motion that I amend this by doing a 1-year trial.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Urick. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? So
To comment on the amendment, twofold here. One is, I'll ask, it's interesting, so 6 months is $802, next year is 2750. Math says that'd be about 1600. I'm just wondering why it's, if we're paying for 6 months, why is it not double that amount? So I'll let you kind of get back to me on that. To Mr. Bell's comments, I'm going to offer a little different lens on Grace Hubble, and I'll badly paraphrase a famous quote of saying, ask not what your conservation authority can do for you, but what could you do for your conservation authority? Because at the end of the day, again, having attended the Conservation Ontario council meeting this morning, the concerns are, yes, the Grace Hubble does everything in its power to try and protect our watershed and our source protection. My question to the gentleman who made the presentation earlier was pointed in terms of the federal versus provincial government, because we only have to look at our own history of what's happened to DCs. You only have to look at Bill 185, cutting the red tape, and it's limiting more powers by conservation authorities. So what was basically being said this morning is, this is exactly the kind of initiative that, even though it's church and state because it's Great Lakes and inland, it's all part and parcel of the same ecosystem. So what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do by supporting something like this is we're trying to lend our support to initiatives like this that are trying to help us, and conservation authorities do what they can, because as the province tries to roll out what they're trying to do, I would like to think they're doing it magnanimously, but they're obviously not necessarily coming in with our best interests. So what ends up happening is we end up being, CAs end up being more limited. And I think so what they are looking for is municipal support. This is a sign of municipal support, because they need our help to have a voice in concert with them to try and institute change, or at least kind of create a level playing field. So I understand your amendment. I am curious why the price differential on 6 months versus a year, but I do appreciate where you're coming from. And I have no problem with saying, yeah, let's try it for a year, see what we get out of it. I truly believe that we will see value from it. And I truly believe what we lend or support to the mechanisms for CAs will also be of value that's intrinsic and may not be just monetary, but as much as its actual support to the bodies that are trying to protect our watershed.
I think you want to answer the question that Councillor Urick raised.
If I may, Your Worship, there is a discount for the first year. It's basically as simple as that. And my other comments are not necessarily related to the amendment itself, but more to Councillor Bell's prior comments. So perhaps you wish to come back to me.
Well, go ahead, and then I'll go to
Want
Councillor.
me to go ahead?
And Councillor Spartley.
Councillor Bell mentioned a number of things. First of all, FCM, I have attended twice, but only when it's in Ontario because we're only funded as one of our conferences if it is locally within the province. And I see the opportunity to attend this conference as being, for us, we now have 3 with 1 funded by the county and 2 locally. So then there would be a choice to be made as to whether or not one of us might go to this one in lieu of Roma or OSAM or AMO or whatever else might be available to us. So I think there's that opportunity. I think, and certainly Councillor Urick is much more aware of the activities of the Grace Level Conservation Authority. I've not sat on that board in my tenure as a member of this council, but it seems to me that they would complement each other well from the perspective of the advocacy role, because this organization does work more at a federal level, for example, and that they could assist perhaps in applications to the federal government if there was something that we wanted to apply for. But I really think this is one of those things that we'll kind of get out of it what we put into it. I mean, if we just join and then, forget about it, then we'll probably be disappointed. But if we take the opportunity to engage with this organization, if our staff, for example, do reach out to them with questions as they arise about the Bay or about something TC Energy brings forward or whatever the situation is, climate change, or I think then we'll find that the expertise and the knowledge is there to support us. But I think it's going to be a matter of us reaching out to them, not sitting back and expecting that as soon as we join, all of a sudden we're going to, have magic money coming to us, or we're going to see, continued presentations or whatever we might have as expectations. I think, we need to get involved. We need to reach out to them. We need to participate. And that's how we will see the benefit in being a member of this organization.
I'm going to go to Councillor Greenfield and then Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Councillor Bell, for bringing forward your ideas. I when I read the motion, I guess I thought about the Great Bruce Source Water Protection Committee, which also has an interest in our source water, and although most of that water that it deals with are from drilled wells, some is surface water too, from the Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. I think I don't know how to say this, but this group may very well be a bit of an ally against the province, because there's no doubt about it, the province has come up with some rather wide open ideas about development in various areas in our province that up until a few months ago was, they were unspeakables, unapproachables, but that has or is unfortunately in the process of changing. The FCM was mentioned, and theoretically the FCM could represent the population of Canada, 37 million people. But then I was just thinking, this organization represents over 40 million people in 2 countries. So it's sizable. Well, one thing it does get into, and I don't know a lot about it, but I know it was very active not that long ago, and that was the invasive species, and in particular the Asian carp that was getting into Lake Michigan. And I haven't heard about these monster fish much the last few years, so I don't know if their presence has been slowed down. I hope it has. I don't know. I saw YouTube reels about these giant fish jumping into small rowboats and upsetting the boat. And Yeah, okay. They also deal with, zebra mussels, which I don't know if gray sawbull and the source water protection do directly. Yeah, Phragmites, I know gray sawbull has been involved, but, so they are widespread as far as their interests are concerned. So, as far as going to a conference, I never thought about going to this conference. I'm blessed with, a wide choice of conferences, but, no, I really think, by joining this group is, it's got to be an advantage. I think there'll be someone there to reach out to, whether we get positive response from them, that time will tell. But, no, I think this is a good idea. I appreciate, the deputy mayor bringing forward the notice of motion, and, I'm willing to go forward with that.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And I had much the same thoughts that Councillor Bell had. Are we doing it double? I asked the question during the presentation, do they do any physical work? Or is it just a bunch of bureaucrats or people gathering a paycheck and talking the talk but not walking the walk? I didn't get anything out of that. I didn't get anything out of this presentation. I would like to see what they've actually done. You mentioned they do zebra mussels. I didn't see anything in here about that. So I'd like to see what they do. Is it everybody paying into a group and they talk the talk, but nothing ever happens? I'd like to know, do they do something? Because he didn't say they did anything. He didn't give us any examples of what they do. I'd like to know, do they do physical work to help the water? And is this something our lawyers should look at before we join, to see how it may handcuff us to some places, like our first speaker said? I just think it should be looked at by a lawyer. It's not the money. It's a reasonable fee to join a group. I just want to know what they do. How do we get that information on what they've done, boots on the ground? You asked about what our shoreline. He didn't answer that question. They would have helped us or could have helped us. Do they give us money? How do we find that information out?
Respond to that.
Your worship, thank you. In the best way I can, Councillor Bartley. My understanding of his response to your question was that as a group, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, they had advocated, lobbied the federal government, and that they felt they were largely responsible for that $1 billion fund becoming available, which any of us have the opportunity to apply for. I also took from Eamon that, for example, when we had our erosion and we had declared a state of emergency and we had reached out to the province for some support, that they could have been an ally for us in that regard. We were not successful with the province, but perhaps having an organization like this behind us, it might have been a different scenario. They're not the people who are going to put rubber boots on and come down to the waterfront. That's not what they do. They work at a much higher level. I see again the advantage being one more of accessing their knowledge and their expertise, and having, this group behind us for whatever situation might arise. And I see them being a strong asset for staff who may at one time or another have questions about our bay or the entire Great Lakes, and they now have a resource that they could reach out to for answers or clarifications or whatever's needed. And I just see that as being an advantage, another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, as we move into further processes with TC Energy, is that they have an additional resource available to them besides the other third-party reviewers and Ainley and so on that we will engage. I just think we need, as many supports as we can gather surrounding us as we move forward, assuming that these IAs happen.
Go ahead, Councillor Yuri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sort of to expand on that a little. Yeah, I don't expect boots on the ground. That's not what advocacy groups do. Councillor Greenfield pointed out that this is potentially like 40 million people in in a body that now has a voice. Grace Hobble, unto itself, cannot go to the provincial government and try and change anything. They're not going to listen to us. Meaford cannot go to the provincial government and try and get any change. Grace Hobble, through the Conservation Ontario, can. Hopefully, we, through an organization like this, now have a larger voice. That is the value that they bring as advocacy, that on a large scale, that has much more voices, like Greenbelt trying to stop the development there last year, and so many groups got behind it that the government had to listen. So I don't expect boots in the ground, but I do expect a voice, collaborative voice, that now all of a sudden has more volume and more gravitas to actually have something done. So I fully expect that's what an organization like this brings to the table, because little old Meaford doesn't get heard a lot by itself.
So just before I call a vote on the amendment, did you wish to speak to, at this point, Councillor Forder?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just add that appreciate Councillor Bell's comments with regards to giving it a try for a year for those that may have a little bit of doubts or concerns with regards to what the real value is in this new commitment. So I think at a minimum, if we commit to a year's trial and we can get all those answers that Councillor Bartley's looking for, we have time to figure all that out at a very minimal cost. Of course, the cost is not the issue at hand, but gives us a good opportunity to figure out exactly what the potential and the return and the value for this municipality is through this initiative. So I'm going to support this, and I'm looking for, we have a lot of questions that aren't answered, so I'm looking forward to getting those answers. But with that said, I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the rest of the councils. I think you've answered some of my questions. My question is your amendment right? Because if we take the first 6 months, is that your year? Or would it be 18 months? You know what I mean? If it's the first year, it's only 6 months. We're not going to learn anything in 6 months. It may have to be 18 months, sorry.
And if I can speak to the amendment briefly, it was pretty uncompelling. I spent about 2.5 to 3 hours at the after I got back from County Council at the meeting in town of Blue Mountains, and was thoroughly wowed by the potential of this organization and the potential, if we join it, to be heard and to get a lot of answers to our questions. I'm going to invite our new employee Holly to just comment on in my view. One of the reasons that was not very compelling is that I don't think we got more than 50% of the message being communicated through sound, which was inferior, and a lack of visual. And unfortunately, the program, the visual program, was pretty uncompelling as well. So yeah, I think that's part of the problem here. We didn't get the information that should have been available to us today.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd agree that the presentation could use some highlighting of the key benefits of it that would be much more clear to show that to council.
Thank you. I think that's important that we understand that you know, the medium is the message or whatever. So, and maybe you have a thought as well.
Yeah, I was just going to ask maybe clarification if you wanted part of that amendment for us to look into the legal implications of joining with I'll call it a lobbyist type group. I think that was something that was brought up, and I thought, you know, that was fairly good double check due diligence on our part, just to make sure that we have that. Again, I wasn't at the other presentation. I didn't see any address to that. Again, there are lots of very strong reasons to attach ourselves, but maybe we should just double check. So maybe that could be part of the amendment as well. And then I do think to what was also said by a number of you, this could be a really good resource for us internally. We do have a number of initiatives, not just, TCE, but also on our own. And certainly this group, as well as what I have heard of what they offer, could bring a lot of areas of experts and specialties that could assist us with some of, like I say, the climate, the tree inventory. Like there's a number of initiatives that we work on. And so that in itself could also be very useful for the value of the dollar. And certainly it's what we make of it. If we reach out, if we use them as a expert group to provide us with feedback and research and studies, that's where this could be very valuable to us in staff.
So I guess I'm going to call the question then. This is the amendment. And did you want to amend your amendment?
Thanks,
or
Mayor.
fine tune it?
My intention is to try this for a full calendar year. We need 12 months. 6 months, of course, that wouldn't be reasonable. So whatever the fee would be for that time period, it's not the money. I want to try this for a year. And even with Madam CAO, your comments about getting some legal advice. So today, if my fellow councillors support the deputy mayor's initiative and bringing this to our attention to vote on, during that course of the year, maybe something would come to light inside that maybe joining year 2 might not be in our best interest. So I don't want to see this not move forward. I want to see this move forward. And anyway, my intention is for a year.
And Councillor Eric, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the heading of redundancy, would we not review this on a yearly basis anyway? We're not signing up for a 5-year contract or a 10-year contract or a lifetime commitment. At the end of at every budget, we're going to say, are we back in? So are we not essentially reviewing this annually anyway? And we will know from staff and from action whether or not it's worth pursuing. So I'm not even sure it requires the commitment of a year. It's literally we review how it went. And if we like it, we stay on. If we don't, we move on.
So I'm going to call the vote on Councillor Bell's amendment to the motion. Everybody understands where I'm going here? I think so. If it's for 1 year, it's a trial.
It should be. You pay for the whole year. I'm sorry, you pay for the whole year. So you're going to have to pay for whatever we get on this year and next year. So it's actually to the end of 25.
Yes.
Would be the amendment. I would think it'd have to be.
And is that what we have, Alex? Okay.
Thank you, through the chair. Looks like a really simple amendment. I was just going to amend the last sort of paragraph. So in order for us to get on this discount, we would have to sign up by the end of this week because June is already almost over. So if we were to sign up at the end of this week, I'm presuming our membership would start in July. So then if we were to do, we were talking about 12 calendar months, but what we're saying is actually 18 months. So is that kind of, I don't know if we can do that, like how their membership fee is structured, but we can definitely ask if that's okay. I'm looking at you because you spoke with the contact in particular about the rates, so.
Your worship, if I may, yes, I did, but this is the only information that they provided, kind of this 6 months. So I'm not sure whether they would give us, because I think they work on a calendar year. So I don't think we would get a full year's discounted rate. You know, I don't think it'd be $802 from January till June of next year. I think that will be a higher amount. But I just want to add while I have the mic that I definitely agree with Councillor Urick. We will address this in the budget every year anyway. So I would agree that the amendment, because there is that little bit of confusion as to what the cost will be and the time frame, is not completely necessary because we will have that opportunity to review during the budget process in 2025. So I would encourage us just to come back to the original motion and go with that, recognizing that come the fall of 2025. If we're not happy, don't see the value in this, then we can remove it from the budget at that point.
So you're suggesting that Councillor Bell withdraw his motion?
No, it's
on the floor, so- Okay. But you can live with it. Okay. Okay. Would you like to read the motion then, or the amendment, if you don't mind, Alex?
I think what we'll say, therefore be resolved that, I'm just reading the last part. Therefore be resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby directs staff to arrange that the municipality be enrolled in the membership with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative for the Municipality of Meaford by June 28th. So that's when we have to register for the remainder of 2024 and for the duration of 2025. With 2026 to be reexamined during the budget process. I guess that makes the most sense. It's easier for me to read it out loud than type.
So are you satisfied? You understand with the motion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment motion? And that looks like it's carried. Yes. So, do we still then have to vote on the motion, or that we've really amended the motion is what we've done? If it's not okay. I think we're done. Sorry. Communications, anything from the communications agenda, especially the correspondence list? Anyone have anything they want to bring forward? Otherwise, I think we're just about finished our business today, and we're going to go into a closed session. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to argue with the clerk, but I think we have to vote on the main motion also.
Sorry, my apologies. Yes, we should vote one more time for the motion as amended. That's right.
And
Sorry.
Well, that's
my last words were before I'm cut off is go Edmonton.
So final vote then on the deputy mayor's motion. All in favor, and that is carried. Okay. So be it resolved that be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford does now go into a closed session at 3:11 p.m. With the CAO and HR manager with delegated authority from the clerk in attendance to discuss personal matters about an identifiable individual, specifically the performance review for our new CAO. And we will be back to report out after that meeting, and we have a confirming bylaw to approve. Thank you. Just reporting out on our closed session at 3:18 this afternoon with the CAO and HR manager with delegated authority from the clerk. In attendance to discuss personal matters about an identifiable individual and specifically the CAO performance review. We discussed Kim Buckham's first 30 days in her position and gave her our feedback. We've got one more item here, our confirming bylaw. The recommendation be it resolved that bylaw 2024-35 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Meaford at its regular and special meetings held in the month of June 2024 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Greenfield and seconded by Councillor Urick. All in favor? That is carried, and declare this meeting adjourned.